Aloha mai kako. Welcome to another episode of Huewai Ola. My name is Kale Chang. It's my pleasure to be your host. Huewai Ola is a webinar series brought to you by Ahakane and Kanaeokana, an opportunity to strengthen our ohana by uplifting and empowering our kane, our Hawaiian men. The term Huewai Ola means a gourd of living water, refers to a man as a vessel of life guided by the god Kane. In Hawaiian culture, gourds also represent knowledge. In this series, again, we'll be showcasing and introducing you to some extraordinary kane, cultural practitioners, scholars, leaders in our community, and some, maybe all of the above. They'll share their perspectives, practices, and advocacy in our lahui. We also do want to mention that Ahakane, as an organization, is in full support of the Black Lives Matter movement. If you are a Kanaka, we encourage you to go find out more, keep learning, keep growing. Mahalo nui for joining us today. We want this to be an interactive experience. So before we begin, please go to our Zoom chat box or Facebook comments and let us know who you are and who you're watching with. Also, where are you joining us from? If you can give us your moku and or ahupua'a, even better. If you're watching from abroad, please let us know what aina here in Hawaii your ohana is pilitu. And again, during these episodes, feel free to ask questions in the comments or the chat, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible, okay? All right. Here we go. Welcome to episode 6 of Huewai Ola. The title of this episode is Wakoe ke Kuleana o Nakanaka, Reserving the Rights of Native Tenants. Let's take a quick moment to meet our very special guest today. He is an Olohelua, a father, community leader, and Aina warrior. He is someone who fought the good fight and actually won. After nearly 20 years, he successfully reclaimed his Kuleana lands in Kauaʻula Valley on the island of Maui. And now he is eager to show other Kanaka the pathway to re-identifying themselves as Hawaiians and also reconnecting to Aina that is rightfully theirs. Ultimately, the true freedom from the system. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome Keʻeaumoku Kapu. Aloha mai.
E Hawaii moko ke ave kai akala e puka mai la e ayala o Maui na hono pilani nui a kamakaulana no e hale akala. Puka mai la ke kiki a kana loa 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 kalai hana hana ki ala i Tahiti. I ke akola no i lana i kaulala au kua e la ke aloha o upehe. I ke kapoma moloka i o moloka i la i ta pule o e o waho ke one kakui hewa kui vale o ka ali kalani. Halia kanani makawa i o mano kalani po mano ke onia o no hili. Tiri mai lau ni hau ka aina ka helela ni ka aina iuhia ta pupui. Makualani huna kamana ona ka mole wale hua male hua kalai na po ana e. Aloha e na kanaka no ta pai aina wa Hawaii nuia kea. E kani. E moian. I ola. Aloha no. O Keʻeaumoku Kapu. Na moko lahaina a ahupua o Kauaʻula. Aloha mai.
Aloha mai kaua. Thank you so much for taking some time to join us. You are involved in many things, and many of us who do know you are aware of a lot of these things, but there are some people that have yet to meet you. And so to give some context into what we're speaking about for this hour, can you give us a little background?
Yeah, sure. My mo'okua Howard stands from the Kawawa Mahi line, and well, it's kind of complex, but in today's society, you would probably want to say that my mother's kanu and hit my father's kanu, and here I am today. I am from the Kawawa line on my mother's side, and I'm also on the Hekili line on my father's side. I am the youngest son of my father, Paul Kai Kapu, and from my mother, Barbara Pualoke Ha'o, Moko Keawe, and as well as Maui Akama. I am the youngest of 7. And I would say a lot of people would say that I am the runt of the family, and I am very persistent in things that I do, the endeavors that I get myself involved in, and it's about strengthening our goals and objectives as Kane today. I've been involved in many movements from Kalahui, Hawaii, in the yesterdays of being politically inclined on understanding our plight as Kanaka Maoli today, and I've always been persistent in following those endeavors that make us unique in what we are today as Kanaka. And my pursuit was always to find our character and identity as a dear Kanaka race of people, knowing that we are who we were and we never lost anything. We just forgot about certain things. So my whole plight on why I do what I do is to try to settle the disagreements amongst not just the heirs, but a lot of people out there in this great Paeaina that lack the understanding or education as to why we are Kanaka, why these lands are different in many ways, and why our strife and our beliefs has a lot to do with not just the physical side, the spiritual side of our belief system as Kanaka, but our physical side on we being stewards of the land. And it's always been my goals and objectives as a Kanaka to educate the broader community as pertaining to we are very much of a unique and interesting ways on how things came about for the destiny of our Kanaka. So, in a roundabout way, um, I've been kind of blessed to know a lot of people out there that helped me throughout my endeavors through my life. I owe it especially to a lot of my elders, my kupuna, that led me on the path that I am today. And I'm still going. And there's a lot of things that I can share with a lot of people on the plight on where we need to go. It all basically started for me uh, about 25, 26 years ago. I used to live in Nanakuli. And living in Nanakuli, all of a sudden, my father came to me one day and said that we need to meet. And when he told me that we needed to go home, me as being the youngest sibling out of seven, I was like, well, what? When? Who? What? And from that time on, leaving Oahu, I knew that we had Kuleana, but it never interested me at that time because the work that I was involved in, trying to raise my family, uh, I never sparked interest in those kind of things. So I would like to just say that in a most facile way of putting it, I've been consumed from the buffet of the world and neglect the plate of my kupuna. Back then when I was living in Nanakuli, but this was kind of a sign for me when my father said that we need to go home, we need to go home now. Then all the little pieces and body parts started to come together and why it was important that my father had this vision. He had this moya that one day he woke up and he said that we need to go home and we need to go home now. So from that time on, I've learned a lot of things on how what has been beneficial for us can also be beneficial for everybody out there. So I have a lot to share. And I hope that I can be that beacon of hope to let other people out there, especially our Kanaka, out there know that we need to stay the course. We cannot give up hope. And it's for the benefit of not only our Lahui, but our intermediate family. And if anybody has any questions out there, hey, fire away. But my life has taken a toll on me and the direction that I needed to go because it was my father's beckoning. It was my father's wish. It was my ohana's wish. The oldest in my family is my sister Kwailani, white. She lives in Papakolea. She has been the beacon for me as well because she is the genealogist of the family that kept everything intact. And all this boils down to genealogy. You have to know who you are, know where you're from, and your purpose. So by these years of being involved in a lot of things that I've been involved in the land title issues, and it also drove me further in this political world that we live, that I was appointed as a council member for the Cultural Resources Commission for the County of Maui by the mayor. I served for about 8 years in the Maui Lanai Island Borough Council. I was the chair for 4 years. I also served as the chair for the Native Hawaiian Historic Preservation Council and advisory to the Board of Trustees. I also served on the federal board as an advisory panelist under the West Pacific Fisheries Management Council. So I just wanted to come home and play tarot. But coming home and understanding that the fight that we need to go towards and making sure that we can secure ourselves as a person that has an undivided interest and a vested interest, that I found myself being involved in other things, not just Pupa Aina, not just Malama Aina, but not even just litigations in court, but also gotta be in tune with what's happening politically in the legislation, in the county, in the state, and the federal level. Some people may think that I'm a political wreck, but I think because of all those little pieces that I needed to pick up to familiarize myself, had a lot to do with why I am the person that I am today. I've finally found the realities of what was never taught to us in the Department of Education, and how we play an important role as Kanaka in this Pai Aina. And like I said, I've been so politically involved, and now that the fight is over, I'm looking at the bountifulness out of my window on where do I need to go to from here. And for me is to further my education, and a lot of people wanting to know, how do we do this and how do we do that? At the same time, trying to look at this place as being a seed bank or a food bank to start feeding the next generations tomorrow. So in a roundabout way, this is only a short inkling of what I've been involved in, and there's many more things that I also can contribute to the Lahui, especially when it comes to identity, character, and title, and Kuleana, and helping our Kanaka find redemption. So yeah.
Mahalo nui. Yes, you've definitely contributed to our Lahui in many different ways over the years. And it's interesting, as we interviewed many different loya or kumu or our guests, their main thing that they're doing currently, a lot of them weren't doing it all their lives. So it's interesting that it's only been the last 20 years of your life that your focus has shifted. Can you discuss a little bit about, you were gracious enough to give us the title for this episode, Ua Koe Ke Kuleana o Naka Naka. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, that sort of becomes the title of the signs that we've been putting with a lot of families, helping families understand how to get themselves plugged into their interests. And when I say interests, is their titles that was awarded to them from the time of the Mahele. So Ua Koe Kuleana Naka Naka is a term that was normally used to specifically identify the rights of the native tenant. And it's a manual that came from Harvard, from Yale, from all these attorneys that studied the land tenures of yesterday's society in Hawaii, and how everything basically blossomed and came about. So when you talk about the rights of access, when you talk about the rights of single dwellings that can be built on Kuleana land, and when you talk about the minerals and the water rights that go with that, those are allodial rights that was afforded to Kuleana during the time of the Mahele. And you know, interestingly enough, Kamehameha III, Kawi Keoli, he reserved certain lands within the Mahele for not only his chiefs, but also his people. And that was under the Uakoe Kuleana Nakanaka authority to assure that the government, as well as the chiefs and the Makainana, was well protected. Sort of similar to Kamehameha First's law of the splintered paddle, the Mamalahoi. That was infused in the paperwork under the Privy Council of 1850 to make sure that the commoners are protected on the roadsides during warfare. Well, in a complex society, that to make sure that when titles were given land commission awards, it was also given a royal patent, which meaning that the kingdom under Uakoeke Kuleana Nakanaka, all those rights that are under that are also for the benefit of the Makainana and the benefit of the government. So basically, they both protect each other. And for me, it was kind of oblivious to the beginning that I always thought that the authority, for us was what we're dealing with today, which is the so-called judicial system. Understanding that when my first cases went into court, that I thought that the court system would do their due diligence to protecting my inherent right, my inherent interest. It doesn't work like that. So when our land cases are filed as a complaint to quiet land titles, it goes to a Second Circuit Court, which is either criminal or civil, which meaning that under Uakoeke Kuleana Nakanaka, those rules can only apply to a higher court, and that's land court. So when I started understanding that, okay, why is all our cases going to the circuit court? Because there is somebody out there that filed a complaint on my kupuna that died in 1870, that their interest is in the property that was awarded to my heir. They don't talk about these other things. By me understanding the background of Uakoeke Kuleana Nakanaka also gives me the authority and understanding, the pure understanding of where that fine line is in Hawaii when it comes to title and when it comes to the judicial system. The court system under the circuit court only handles criminal or civil proceedings. They don't handle land titles. They don't they handle disputes. If two parties claim to own a piece of something, that's what they handle. But when it comes to land titles, that's supposed to be in a higher court. And right now I have 2 more cases in front of the Supreme Court at this moment. So when you understand Uakoeke Kuleana Nakanaka, you can actually pull them up online. Punch Uakoeke Kuleana Nakanaka. It's a law term. They'll pop up a whole window of Wikipedias, and people can actually learn what that is all about. So when you go home to your aina and you find out that your kupuna was from this place, you really need to know the lay of the land. Not only the lay of the land, but who your kupuna was, how important he was at that time. Then you look at the lay of the land and you go to your Palapala Silanui and start reading the native testimonies or foreign testimonies. He had 1 pahale, he had 1 kula, he had 3 pauku, he had 5 lo'ikalo. That's the lay of the land, and within the lay of the land is Uakoeke Kuleana Nakanaka. If there was a dwelling on that land, then you are entitled also to a dwelling that was provided on the land during the time of the Mahere, during the time of the indices. Once the name was placed in the indices awards to quiet land titles in the Hawaiian Islands, those titles are quieted already. The kingdom made it that way. Today, we're looking at, okay, who filing one quiet title in the court system today under a complaint, which is in the wrong place. So everything is an illusion. Until we understand what Uakoeke Kuleana Nakanaka is really all about, then we understand who we are, ourselves. What is our Kuleana? Where are we from? We are not from this place, we are of this place. So in the most simplest way to put it, Uakoeke Kuleana Nakanaka is our Kanaka's Bible. It gives us the information that we need to do things on how everything was placed in the beginning when the crown felt that it was necessary to start looking at how we can provide for the Makainala, how we can provide for the ali'i, and how we can provide for the government. A 33rd and a third interest are 3 parts. And I tell people, if somebody claims to sell your property, no more than 3 signatures, you're the chief, the government, and the Makainala, that's still not valid. So these are the kind of things that I've learned by studying just that terminology and what was written and what was researched. The many years of research to work with Kuleana Nakanaka. So it's actually a Bible, a book that went through different works, and it's in Harvard, like I said, in Yale University. A lot of the books or the laws that derive from the kingdom, it's all secured in those kind of areas, in those places. And it's good to know that we diving deeper into understanding the kanawai of Hawaii and bringing that forward. Wakoike Kuleana Nakanaka is one of them.
What was the moment that you decided to change your focus and go to Maui and start your work with Huewai Ola Valley? Was it your father, or you said you went to Maui first and didn't want to be involved at first?
Yeah, no, actually, my dad, my father was exiled from here back in 1947. So literally the mill companies came up over here. My dad was about 14 years old, and he was taken from Kaula Valley, and he was taken to Lanai, never to return to this place ever again. So just one day, all of a sudden, I was living in Nanakuli, and my father said, you guys gonna come visit? So we all visited, and my father said that we needed to go home. And he had this vision of this wahine that was telling him, Elimai, come home. You need to come home already. And in his in his dreams, he said there was 2 other people that needed to be there. One was my sister Kuleana, she was the genealogist. My other brother Kalani Kapu, he was the core or the backbone on everything that had to do with our past histories and stuff like that. And me, being the 3rd person that my father said that I need to be there, probably had to do with a lot of things that I was involved in. I was involved in Kalahui, Hawaii back then. I was the senior officer for the Nakua back then. My Kuleana was to Malama Mililani Trans at that time from Nanakuli. And I was on construction work. I built highways. I'm one of those that is responsible of building H Street. And having this opportunity when my father said that we needed to go home, literally we came here, and just this veil just overcame me, and saying that it's all of our responsibility, and this is my father's wishes. And with that, I needed to literally sacrifice my whole life and sell all my early possessions and pack up whatever I could, and made a huge commitment to come home and noho on this aina, because that's what my father said we needed to do. The litigation never started not until afterwards, but I think the key moment as to why this one happened is it's all God sent. Because back in 1994, when we used to have the discussions, and he distinctively reminded us, saying that we gotta go home now. Then I started digging deep into titles, and this 20-year adverse possession claim from 1979 to 1999 gives the right of a foreigner to adverse possess somebody's property if the property was abandoned. All those things started to come to fusion as to where my father said we gotta go home now. Because in 1999, when it hit 1999, we were living here 2 years already. Pioneer Mill sold all these lands in Lahaina, 5,000 acres with a warranty title deed for $15 million. And that included the property that my father was raised on. So By understanding that, it gave me the directive to say, okay, if they claim to own these lands and my father is saying otherwise, the war won't happen. And this was a total outcome out of 20-something years that the jury found in the deliberations that Pioneer Mill never owned this property and that Mr. Keʻeaumoku Kapu has an interest. So the drive for me at that time to stay the course is, I was reluctant to find an attorney. It was a holy guy from the mainland. His name was Richard McCarty. And he has been my personal guide and attorney and literally taught me how to shoot those quivering arrows and making sure that I hit the target. He was the one that introduced me to the finite art of the kanawai, not just the kingdom kanawai, but understanding the U.S. constitutional kinds of things. He drove me in an area where before I went jump in a fire, to make sure that I know why I jump in a fire and that I didn't have to jump in a fire. So that took a very strong toll for me to really get involved and it's not just me, it's my whole ohana. Without all of us peeling together and really understanding the gist and understanding where we are and how we were placed in a society. For myself, I was raised, believe it or not, Palolo Valley, KPT, even Merritt housing. My grandparents was living over there. And, Papakolea is another statistic of people saying, but these are kind of places that I love. But we were subjects, of a state mandate for Native Hawaiians that fell under the list of poverty. Okay. So that was my drive. That was my drive to say, hey, you know what? We get something better than this. And it's not in getting stuck in the 9-to-5, paying bills and all these kinds of things. So back then, in 1996, 1997, I told my job, the hell with it, I'm done. And I'm not gonna work for nobody but myself. And from that time all the way till today, I've been able to understand and learn a lot of new redemptions and tricks and avoidances and traps and all these kinds of things. And whatever we decide as an Ohana unit, we decide together that this law that we follow, or this United States theory that we follow, is illegal. And until we can come up with some kind of solution and really start putting our people back on the island that belongs to them, it's always going to be push and shove, push and shove, push and shove. And even though when you provide clarity for everybody to truly understand, there is hope, they always try to find some way of pulling us back in that bucket again, keep pulling us back in that bucket again. So the drive for me is why I've been consistent all this time is just thinking about those things. Why all of a sudden we gotta be second class to the lands that was awarded to us from our kanawai, from our crown, from our kupuna, from our ali. I think that's more, a lot of my mentors out there. One of them, we start off on that mo'olelo, that chant, kamana'o. We've been many places together. We talked many times about how we can huli this, how we can huli this system. We got to give up sacrifices. And without doing that, we got to give our people hope to know that there is other things out there that are waiting for us. There are other greater opportunities out there that are waiting for us. And that's been my drive and still my drive. So now I'm doing titles, showing people what kind of palapala they need. Because if all of a sudden one day your name get called, if you read a public notice and say, okay, the so-called company is challenging the heirs of, and they name them all, yeah? My Kuleana now, because of the people that I've been involved in, especially my attorneys, Richard McCarty was my first son. He passed in December 2015. Now I have another good friend and attorney. His name is Lance Collins and Bianca Isaki. They've always been at my side and always there to help Kokua in just getting the message out. So we do the scholar series by getting a lot of scholars throughout despite Aina to talk about certain issues, to talk about the Constitution, to talk about Mauna Kea, to talk about water, to talk about land resources, to talk about the Kanawai. And that's what we do. So we still pressing to make sure that people know that there's alternatives out there. Don't give up. Stay the course. When you think that you're down on the bottom of the barrel, hey, the barrel is deeper than that. Trust me. There is hope for our Kanaka. And hopefully I can be that beacon, because my strive, my drive, now that I understand today, is I was placed here for a reason. And the reason is my victory becomes everybody's accomplishments. In a roundabout way, I hope I will answer your question.
Mahalo nui. What's super interesting about your story is there's been other conflicts regarding Aina, and usually the Kanaka comes out short or comes out on the bottom of things. And I think it's super interesting that you didn't, and it took you a long time. Can you maybe bullet point a little of the journey of the 20 years and how you got to, because we're not talking about Hawaiian history, we're talking about this thing still going on, right? I mean, up until April, you even had an appeal that you just won too. So if you could just touch on a little bit, so let people know, first of all, that it's possible, and maybe a few steps that happen along the way.
Yeah, I think we gotta be attentive to what's happening in our surroundings. Like for us, man, I never read the newspaper, but until one day my wife said, you gotta read the newspaper. And it wasn't us being summoned, it was other families that was being summoned throughout the years that when a name was summoned, and I'm gonna give you an example, one was Keʻeaumoku. And I know the Keʻeaumoku family, so I got in touch with them saying that, you know what, you guys gotta go court. If you guys not show up, then you guys gonna lose by default. So I ended up going to a lot of the court cases when they were summoning other families for litigation. And when people don't show up, I stand up and I say, Your Honor, I'm here to answer to the complaint of this Ohana. And you go in front, you put your name down, then the attorney sends you the pala. That's how we've been losing our battles, because our Kanaka, we don't read the newspaper. We don't know whether or not somebody putting one notice on their lands or one notice on the families. So that's where it started for me. Especially the property that I'm right now on, which is the property of Apa'a. Down in 2000, they filed a quiet title adverse possession claim on this land. And I know we had ties to this property, but we were living about, say, maybe 500 yards from this property, lower down the mountain. And I saw this summons. So this was one. Then another one was the county on the bottom. Then, like I said, the Keʻeaumoku. I had a total of 8 quiet title cases going simultaneously at the same time. And the reason why is because when you go up, you show up for court, the thing that really struck me was when the attorney says, okay, is there anybody here to represent the so-called Ohana? And nobody's there. The magic wand says judgment to the plaintiff. That's it. Wow. That severs a tie. That gives it even more merit to steal lands without due process, especially when it comes from the Second Circuit Court and not a land court, because it goes in the Circuit Court under a complaint. It's a complaint, yeah? So, like I said, 8 separate cases I've been fighting. We've been able to form an LLC called Kuleana LLC and got more of the Kuleana families involved on the fight. We filed declaratory rulings against land companies that claimed they were doing agricultural lots, but they was only planting orange trees and coconut trees and 5-acre lots, paying the same amount of money that the regular residents would be paying in taxes. That's been kind of a stronghold for me of really understanding what we need to do, how we need to do it, how we need to secure ourselves, how we need to secure an interest of Kanaka. So all this boils down to every Kanaka in the state of Hawaii has an undivided interest. They need to figure out where that is. Because if you're not there at the table, yeah, to address the issue, then you may as well be the food on the table, because that's the way they're gonna subject your life to be. So for me, there's a redemption on how families need to prepare themselves by putting together as simple as affidavit on telling your story genealogically wise now. So when I say affidavit, I'm talking about like, okay, the first line would be I, Keʻeaumoku Kapu, am of lawful age. I was born in 1960, blah, blah, blah. And my exhibit would be my birth certificate. Then my parents, then my grandparents, then my great-grandparents, then my great-great-grandparents. It has to be putting together in conformity to have standings when you go in court. When you go in court answering to one complaint and you have nothing in front of you, the judge is going to say judgment to the plaintiff. So the only thing, the route you would have to go from there is file an appeal. Hopefully the appellate courts would be lenient and put your docket right back on in front of the circuit court once again. Appellate courts would just say that, okay, we want this to go to trial because I think the circuit courts erred in this. So I know I'm an attorney, never chose to be one, but being involved in this by having these people be my guide and what I needed to do, the kind of mana o mo'olelo that I needed to talk about, burials of my kupuna that is laid out throughout this land. I think that was it. The iwi kupuna of this place what drove me of what I am today. That I represent them because they don't have a voice today. And where I live, people would say, why you like live up there where you get over 2,000 burials all over the place? Because they related to me. Nobody is there to watch over them. They need to be protected. And that's kind of been my drive, my pinnacle drive to making sure that this place is honor, is protected, and it's safe. Because other people who are interested over here, they're going to maul this place. They're going to bulldoze them. They're going to hit our iwi. They're going to pull them out. They're going to put them in on the agenda for the state to start burial council for them to make a determination of what happens. It's not their Kuleana, it's our Kuleana. So I think that's what it took for me to really wake up and understand where the fight is. And believe it or not, to me, I like to believe that it's fresh in my mind and it's just starting to flourish. Did I answer that fairly enough?
Yes, of course. Mahalo. Mahalo nui. I do have a couple questions about the Palapala side of things, but before we do that,
yeah,
can you just paint a picture of Kauaʻula Valley for us? What it looks like, where it is on Maui, and why it's so special to your ohana. I mean, besides it being your aina.
Sure.
Tell
Kauaʻula
us how
Valley,
beautiful it is.
where they light the torch for graduation, the L. They always light the L for graduation. And I live, if you're looking from Makai, Mauka, I live to the right of the valley. I live in an area that has a lot of history. One of my taro patches that I operate today once belonged to Princess Nahiana Ena. My property is surrounded by a famous Hawaii system called Ti'ilani. and it can still be operational. Thanks to the laws that they gave it to a public utility company. This land up here and all the relations of families from the top where I am all the way to the bottom has a direct relationship to the crown. The Konehikis of this area was La'ahili, Nama'u, Kalaipaehala. The ridge right next to me was the ridge of Princess Ruth Keli Kolani. And when she passed, it went to Pauahi, which now today is managed by Kamehameha Schools. So there's a lot of deep history, rooted history. And when I look out through my window, where I am looking out right now, I see the pinnacle of Lanai. And I think that's why I get such good service up over here. The Lanai provides me with the antenna so I can do the things I need to do. Where I lived before, hard. But this area that I live in is called Ko'oka. And I'm in the Ahupua'a of Huewai Ola, which is the most interesting Ahupua'a in Maui. It's kind of an L shape, and it goes all the way to the bottom on this place called Moku'ula, the island of Moku'ula. And that area also, just adjacent to Moku'ula, is my cultural center for Naikane o Maui, which is on the property of Pikanele. So all these places, the Vahipana that I live, it's a Vahipana. It's a story place. And it's a story that needs to be told again. And I think that's the fire that I have in me to reflourish these lands, to make these lands more for feeding our lahui once again. Not only just me'ai, but the knowledge and the history and the character and the importance of to what's under all the brush that Pioneer didn't cover up. In the valleys behind me is a pu'uhonua, 5-tier heiau, and it's all written in the shows of time from Abraham Fonanda and Samuel Kamakau in the Ruling Chiefs, the book of the Ruling Chiefs. When they talk about Hale Kumukalani, that's right behind me. Hale Kumukalani, where Kahikili had his meeting with his red cloaks before he sent Kahahana to govern over Oahu. So we interrelated everything that we do, and interesting, we talk about it now that I'm in the pinnacle. So I must be the Lolo, yeah, where I need to start disseminating all this information out to all the Pai'ainas, to all the mokus out there, that we still got what we got. We never lost it. There's more to it that I can describe, or what this place is all about. And before me, on the top of the flats, within, I would say about 40 acres, there's over 2,000 taro patches. Yeah.
Wow.
So this was the food bank. This area was a food bank. Yeah. Oh. And believe it or not, well, I know everybody knows it, but Lahaina was the capital of the kingdom. People say it was. I say it still is. Moku'ula is still there. The descendants that was here during the time of the crown, they're still here too. And they've joined on to what we're doing. I become the messenger. We had to disseminate information so a lot of the families can start filing for their properties too. Right now we have about a total of 31 families that have done their pala in their affidavit form, and a lot of them have placed their Kuleana as a priority and starting to clean today.
Oh, sounds like a beautiful place to be. Most people who know you from many years ago know you in the cultural practice of lua and the physical discipline of that cultural practice. I think it's fascinating that someone like you, now your meakawa or your weapons are palapala and papers and documents and research. I know part of your 20-year journey was basically simplified down into a couple different types of palapala. The palapala that the third party or the corporation or whoever thought they had, that was all they needed. And in the end, the palapala that you proved and showed that was the true paperwork for that aina. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between those two things?
Yeah, sure. When all of a sudden, like say for instance, Pioneer Mill decides to sell off lands. Well, in this case, Pioneer Mill normally, if somebody wants to cover up something, they would sell it off like say maybe 50 acres or 100 acres or piecemeal these things just to cover the track. I think one of the biggest mistakes was Pioneer Mill sold 5,000 acres. 5,000 acres going all the way up to the conservation line, all the way down to the ocean with a warranty title deed. Now, warranty title deed only is as good as the person that sold it to you, where he says that, well, if somebody challenges your title, then Pioneer Mill is going to come in and pay for your legal expenses. That's literally how it works. And they have to come up with legitimate documents to show that the land was legally transferred. For me, I look at that, and all of a sudden, there's a parcel that belonged to a family of 6. Then, when you look at the pala, that the family of the 6 had no say to only one person that was allowed to sell the property without the consent from the other 5. That to me tells that, okay, somebody sold somebody else's undivided interest that they're not supposed to sell. But normally it's never families doing these things to each other. Normally it's Pioneer Mill putting in fictitious names saying that you kupuna won't sell your property, and that's how we got this property from your ancestor. And my argument was always, if this person was the one sold the property to you guys, and you guys claim that you guys have title to them, what happened to the other siblings and the other heirs? They must have had children where those interests would bestow upon those children. I'm in court right now for that exact theory, that they claim that all the ancestors all died and there was only one living that would sign the property over. Well, to the brothers and sisters, if the brothers and sisters had children, those children also acquired an undivided interest. We never knew that 20 years ago, that all of a sudden, all it took was this guy for Simon Pala, which normally was a fictitious person, especially dealing with the milk companies or pineapple companies. These landlords that came from the Great West, when they came over here, it wasn't about sugar cane, it wasn't about pineapple, it was about real estate. So when you start understanding the Pala Sila Nui, the land commission award that was awarded to an heir, through interstate succession, when that heir went passed away, the property had to have gone to somebody with that koko, with that blood. Now, if the kupuna that was awarded the property would marry one wahine, they had children. Back then, normally they had 3, 4 children. When they passed, that interest went to all 4 of them, undividedly, split up, quarter. Today, you may have 2,000 families that own an undivided interest. Yeah? So when these land companies saying that, oh, I own this property, my first reaction would be, how much of it? Because you cannot own the whole thing. And if you do, then show me the pala that can prove that you own the 100% interest of all these heirs that acquired these properties from the Mahele, transferred down Alorio, interstate succession by blood. And even though, now if we look at, okay, that's how the system worked back then, then all of a sudden the sever came in where these lands was illegally overthrown by the kingdom, thanks to President Clinton for clarifying Public Law 103150, that the lands was overthrown, that the crown was overthrown. So that's why I say, before we can go forward, we got to talk about the problem. So when things were happening back then, all land transactions and sales when stopped from that time when the crown was illegally overthrown. Consented through the President of the United States. He's saying that he apologized for us illegally overthrowing the government. So if that's the case, then all these things that were happening in the past, we gotta bring that to fusion. And when it comes to land title, they have no inkling to show that those lands were transferred legally, even to the fact that our government was overthrown by the United States. So yeah, uh, so that's where we are. Come
And even when
on.
you were talking about these land companies saying that the land was turned over to them, what was interesting about the signatures? I heard you talk about this before.
Yeah, well, like for in Lahaina, you had a lot of Samuels and a lot of signatures that we've seen. And it's good that because of Noe Silva, found the petition in Washington D.C. Because when you go through those are about the same time, 1897 for 1893 to 1897. Now you look at the on those signatures and you compare it to the titles that they claim that our kupuna went sign over, it don't match. And we have proof of that from the petition, from the Kue petition of our kupuna. Now they claiming that our kupuna went transfer interest to Eisenberg and Horner, which was Pioneer Mill AmFac. And Eisenberg and Horner, believe it or not, was a German company. So during war, when U.S. went into war with Germany, they were changed from Eisenberg and Horner to American factors. Unreal, yeah. But understanding that we have tools today that can legitimize ourselves in court to take it to a bigger level, especially when it came to the signature document. Oh, our kubuna, they was literate. Their penmanship, Old English writing, calligraphy was immaculate. When you see documents that just show an X, like they trying to make the assumption that our kupunas never was educated, that they didn't even know how to spell their own name. Oh, I take offense to those because we have the mamao, we have the historical documents and the records to show that our people was one of the most literate people in this world back then in the early 1800s. Very literate. So yeah, a lot of the titles and documents that I saw automatically tells me just by looking at it that it was fraudulent. And it still is fraudulent. And trying to explain to a lot of these people that come here thinking that they can just purchase land and sell it off like it's a hot commodity, like selling cars. People gotta know that buyer beware. When they transfer interest in the real estate, we even found that in small writings in the transfer of title that this quote that is written in Latin and literally says that that's the disclaimer where they cannot get sued because it says in Latin, buyer beware. So buyer beware meaning your property, even though if they sell it to you, can be challenged by an error of the original land commission award of those boundaries.
Mahalo nui. So let's say you sparked an interest or lit a fire under a kanaka at home that we get plenty of time now. I know other guests have encouraged our kanaka to reconnect by first step, looking into your mo'okuau, how if guys want to start their journey to doing something similar to your journey, what do you suggest for them to get started?
We have other people that are also in the process that have taken some of my title workshops that I've done. So I went to Kauai, to Big Island, I went to Oahu.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
consistently went to Oahu to do these title workshops, and I give everybody on one USB thumb a whole bunch of information that they can start the process. And the process, everybody gonna tell you, yeah, it's about genealogy. But it's not only about genealogy, it's about how you're gonna tie this mana or this mo'olelo together. Who was this person that was awarded lands from the Kanawai, from the great Mahele, from the time of the Mahele? From him, where did it go? So that's what we're looking for. Certified documents from the health department on birth certificates, marriage certificates. You can go to the archives and you can look for census reports, native testimony, foreign testimony. You can go to the courthouses and you can look for probates. If you punch in your Ohana name now, mahalo to Office of Hawaiian Affairs, you get Papa Kilo database, you get Kipuka.
Right.
There is resources out there that can help our lahui on their way to redemption. But it'll give you enough information to pull out documents, the archives. It's good when you go to the archives or the courthouses, when you pull out documents from the microfiche, if you find probates, have the courthouse certify it, because that's like holding the actual probate. The things that I've learned throughout the past from a lot of my ohana out there. So I just a messenger. Well, let me put it this way. I don't motor somebody else driving the car. But we've been able to put a redemption packet together to literally, I've been giving it out. In the beginning, I've been asking for donations so I could fly to other property or other islands so I can do workshops over there. But now, all this, I mean, if people send me a link on Messenger or anything, on email, I send them the documents because it's not mine. But I also encourage a lot of people, you're going up this route. I can show you the road, but you got to do the work because it's not my moral power. It's not my challenge, that's yours. I can give you enough information to make sure that I can put you on the right path, on the right path.
Mahalo nui. Whether you know it or not, you're like myself. A lot of men look up to you in our Hawaiian community, and I appreciate everything that you shared today. Is there any closing thoughts you'd like to share with especially our kane of our lahui before we leave?
Yeah, especially at this time, you get this COVID thing going on. We got a makaala, and without us, especially for the strength of the kane being at the forefront, we gotta be the one to really understand the plight and stay the course. There is the boogeyman out there that wants us to fall. And we cannot afford that, especially for our kane, because we are responsible of taking care of everything that was bestowed upon you by our kupuna. If you don't know that you have, then I hope that through this message, through this mana'o, this kuka kuka, that you find an interest and infatuation to really be involved. But you gotta stay the course because the tricks and traps are out there. It's not for us. And we're falling for something so materialistic that there is something even bigger hopes for us as a lahui. And our kane gotta stay strong because our wahine need our kane, our kamali'is, our mo'opunas, all of them, they need us. And without us, who gonna watch the door? I also tell Rakain, my sons, they're all men and they get their own families, and I tell them, all of a sudden, if somebody knock on your door, who you gonna send? Your wahine? We should be the one answering that door. We should be the one at the forefront. We should be the one for be doing all these kind of things for the benefit of our ohana and for the benefit of our lahui. We need to identify who we were once upon a time. We apply those values. Nila kiai of what we are. We're an indigenous race of people. And if we fall and we stumble, we just believe that you have others like me and others out there that is willing to go over there and help you, pick you up. Whatever you need to do, whatever we need, you need from us. No scared to ask. We there. We should be there for each other, always and forever. Leonala
Yola. Well, on behalf of Kanaeokana and Ahakane and myself personally, I just want to thank you again. Mahalo nui for sharing your time, first of all, and of course for your insights and inspiration, especially for our kane of our lahui. Thank you so much, Keʻeaumoku, for your time today. I'm going to speak a little bit to close our episode. and share some resources for our guests. Also, ladies and gentlemen, other programs that we have on Kaneokana, be sure to support all of them. There's so many wonderful shows happening right now. We have Le'anuenue, Aikole, and I believe there's a few others too. Of course, Huewai Ola, every Friday, 2 p.m. Follow us on Instagram at Ahakane and Kaneokana, and also our Facebook pages as well. Mahalo nui to our sponsors that make this wonderful program possible. Kaneokana, Ahakane, Papa Ololokahi, and the Consuelo Foundation. Again, a reminder that we're not alone out there. There are many resources, especially for you Kane and you Wahine as well. During this pandemic, we want to remind everybody that there are resources. Don't be afraid to reach out. We have a list of resources here, and we have kupuna care resources, resources for veterans, and COVID-19 specific things. Otherwise, gosh, it always goes by so fast, yeah. If you have time, please help us improve by taking a short survey. Your voice does matter. And again, tune in every Friday, 2 p.m. on Kaneokana's Facebook page or website. And we'll see you next Friday at 2 p.m. Thank you for joining us for He Huewai Ola, and we'll see you next week. Aloha no.
Aloha.